Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide live business and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our first episode of season 17, a very special guest and author of The Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom of Change, Sylvia Worsham. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Sylvia, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Dr. Dan. I'm so happy to be here with you live from Austin, Texas. And like we were talking in our pre-interview, I am of Mexican culture. I come from South Texas. I was raised down there, and I was a perfectionist high achiever. I worked in sales and leadership for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals for many years. So I'm very familiar with this concept of needing to control my circumstances and achieving to be happy concept, because the prime breeding ground was sales, and pharmaceutical sales was prime for someone like me. And so that's how I grew up. I grew up being modeled perfectionism and high achiever because I come from a family of doctors. And I saw that growing up and thought that's what happiness should be. That's the example of success. So I must achieve to be happy. And if I don't achieve success, then I'm a failure. And so I just kept achieving. And come 2012, I had a major health crisis. I faced a 20% chance of dying. And luckily, I received 3 miracles from God that saved my life. And it kind of shifted my lens somewhat from this perfectionist, high-achieving performer to someone who looked at a turning point and looked at the opportunity to shift my life towards my divine soul's purpose and start on that quest. And that's where I became a life coach, certified under John Maxwell back in 2017. And since then, I've spoken on stages and I've written my book, Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom of Change. And all came through promptings I received by turning inward when times got very, very tough and finding that inner voice and wisdom that guided my path. So that's who I am in a nutshell. I'm a mom. I'm now happily married in Austin, Texas, with a son, an 18-year-old boy who's now at Texas State, and an 8-year-old daughter. And I'm as happy as I can be.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here and taking the time out of your busy schedule to be able to join us and enlightening our listeners. So tell me a little bit more about the day that you woke up and you said to yourself, I need to change because the route that I'm in is no longer the route that's going to make me happy. Is it after the health scare that this occurred, or was it afterwards? Was it prior to it? When did this all happen?
It actually happened afterwards, the health scare. The health scare was an enormous awakening because I surrendered completely, which for someone like me, a control,
Yes,
obsessed person, because as women, we're obsessed with perfectionism. We want to be that super woman. Yes. And that achievement and that constant drive to be this woman will burn us out eventually. We can't even be there for ourselves, much less for our children or husbands or homes or even careers, because we're so burned out. And so I was grateful for the awakening of nearly dying and receiving 3 miracles. That was a big one. But what happened was later, when I tried to move to Austin with a job with Pfizer, and Pfizer won't move me, even though I'm their top performer. I've been their #1 sales rep multiple times. I've proven myself, and they won't give me a transfer to Austin. And I have to start all over again with a brand new company. And my hours are through I took a significant pay cut. 6 figures to 5 figures, which is pretty big for someone that had worked her way up the ladder, and all for love, which I was okay with. But when you actually step into that change and understand what those choices are, and you realize that the people you've sacrificed for, the companies you worked so hard for that didn't even blink an eye when you needed a hand, that's when I realized I'm on the wrong path here. Like, this is not my life. This is not why I survived. There's got to be a much more powerful reason why God gave me 3 miracles. Because not just anybody gets 3 miracles in 72 hours.
No.
That's not how life works. So there must be a very powerful reason. And I started taking personal development courses, started reading books on personal growth, and I started to follow John Maxwell. And really, it didn't come till that time that I was telling you that I was trying to move to Austin. That's when I realized this time is coming to an end, and I will need to step into change, whether I'm ready or not. Because if I want this other life, I will need to step into it in full deception. Since you're in neuro-linguistic programming, you know what I'm talking about. When your ego comes into play and starts telling you that you're not worthy of those changes, that you should just stay where you're at because you're just not smart enough. That's the time that you really need to step into that change, because that's just your programming and your trauma talking. That's not who you are at your core. And so I did. I stepped in there, but it was tough. It was tough because it was not something I was used to. But the point came after.
So do you think, I mean, the element of fear, which is a lot of people suffer from because they're afraid of failing, if they do this big jump or that leap, what were you afraid the most about the changes that you had to encounter?
Afraid of failing, because I had grown up with someone, my father, I love him dearly. But when you're operating from fear and not enoughness, if that's your motivation for achievement, then you need to change that, because fear is not your friend.
No.
Fear is going to keep you stuck in that mode of thinking. You become addicted to this time frame in your life because you get results. And so you think that, well, if I just keep doing this, I'll keep getting the same result. But as you get older in life and you go through some of the changes that occur, especially after what I encounter where I'm in full surrender mode, once you surrender and you cross that line, you can't operate from fear anymore, because now you're operating at higher vibrational levels. And that just is not in alignment to fear. Fear is going to keep you in your box, safe, and is not going to allow you to propel forward. You're never going to be able to step into that change until you identify and uproot those beliefs that are holding you hostage. And in my case, the one that was holding me hostage was, I'm not enough unless I achieve. So when you step down from corporate America and you're not achieving anymore and you become a stay-at-home parent, that's the time that you're going to start learning what life journey is truly about. It's not about achieving. It's about love, the love in your life. And I know that to some people that sounds strange, because you're thinking, but you had this successful life. You were a top performer. You were making tons of money. Aren't you successful then? I said, no, I wasn't. Because when I stood on stage, Dr. Day, in front of 300 of my peers at Pfizer, and I was the top performer in the nation, I did not feel happy. The thought that came through my head was, is this it? Is this what happiness feels like? Because this doesn't feel very good.
But was it more ego-driven, Sylvia? Because if you experienced all the success in the past and you were afraid that you were not going to be perceived by your peers as successful as you've been, do you think that was creating the fear that you were so reluctant to experience?
Yes, of course. The ego identity, I've always talked about this in Journey to Me. There's 2 identities that battle it out when you go through major change: ego identity and soul identity. And they start battling it out. And it's 2 sides to you that exist within you. The ego is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's your self-image. So if your self-image is comprised of beliefs that limit your amazing capacity as a human being, then those need to be identified and shifted to the side of the loving side of you. Because And every movie out there kind of showcases this, doesn't it? Like Star Wars, you see Yoda, the light and the red and the dark.
Yes.
The ego can be portrayed as the dark side of you because it's limiting that amazing capacity, right? If it's stemming from fear, the motivation is fear, which in my case it was. On the other side, you have soul identity. So this is the person that you were created to be. You were born this way. You were born fearless. When we're babies, we don't understand fear. We just keep going. We stand up, we walk, we fall, and we don't like take that as like, okay, well, I fell. I'm not going to try this again. No, you stand right back up, you toddle back up, and you keep falling and you keep getting up and you keep learning. Oh, this is how if I'm going to fall, I should put my hand out because that breaks my fall. Well, we forget those lessons as we get older and we revert back to, I just don't want to fall. And so I don't want to fall means I'm going to stay in this little box that I can control. And those are control patterns of behavior that are very common when you're going through change, because that's your programming. This is what you saw growing up as a kid. You witnessed it in your parents. You witnessed it in all the people that influenced your life, and it became normal in your mind. Your mind took that as normal because there's no filter in the subconscious part of our mind. It just kind of takes it in, right? I mean, and so, but a lot of people think, well, I can think this through. And it's like, no, not really. Your subconscious, your emotional mind is really fully in control. And it was fully in control of mine. It was controlling me constantly. And it wasn't until this awakening that when I received the 3 miracles, that I really started to see life a little differently. And I started to turn inward. And when you turn inward, that's when your soul identity starts to guide you. It starts to guide that path that is really truly meant to be your path, your journey. And that's what started to happen to me. The more I turned inward, the more I saw.
So basically, if you teach people on how to go with the flow, that will the need to be able to fear the outcome. Because if, let's say, I mean, I've learned a lot about the Stoicism, philosophy of Stoicism, where they talk about the dichotomy of control, where you focus more on the things that you can control and just go with the things that you can't control. Because what's the point of fighting that? So by like
lean into it, right? Lean into that path because you're going to learn something. Like when you're little, you learn how not to fall eventually, right? Yes. But you kept going. That's the thing that most people forget is think back to your childhood when you were fearless. What stopped you from moving forward in faith that you were going to get there? And then when you start reflecting, because when I wrote Journey to Me, I started to go back in time and reflect on those years and realize that what was really stopping me from moving forward were those belief systems. So step 1 for me was uprooting and shifting. It's identifying what are those belief systems that are standing in my way and shifting them over to where I become enough. Like I am enough now. I am God's masterpiece. I am worthy of all the gifts that I receive on a daily basis. I don't have to sacrifice my joy because coming from the Mexican culture, I believed I had to sacrifice something. I couldn't have it all because I was a woman. And I think most women fall into that trap because of our culture and the way we were raised. And it's just, it just comes down generation to generation until somebody has the courage to break that cycle and say, wait, why? Why do I have to sacrifice? Why can't I have it all? And what does it mean to have it all? Because the definition of success changes as we gain wisdom along our path.
So do you feel that the happiness is interconnected with the level of success? Because again, people always attribute success with happiness. And when success does occur, they realize that the definition is no longer appropriate.
That's a kind of loaded question, Dr. Dan. You know that.
Of course.
That's a really loaded question because you think of it like, if I go back to the perfectionist high achiever in me, success was I needed to achieve to be happy. But I did all that and I wasn't happy. So what really needed to change was what is happiness? Where does it come from? And what do I deem successful? Because I, unbeknownst to me, subconsciously was carrying my father's definition of success as my own. I owned that like it was mine, but it wasn't mine. It was my dad's definition of success. And I don't realize this until I write Journey to Me in 2020. So how long has it passed? Like, you're talking about 2008 to 2020. How many years have passed?
Yeah.
That you're operating from this notion that in order to be enough, or in order to be successful or happy, you need to achieve success at the highest of levels. And so for my dad, it was like, well, you need to go get your master's and you need to go get your PhD, because that to me is successful. Well, that's your definition, Dad, because you come from a different set of belief systems. Right. You were raised differently than me. So that's understandable. But in my case, I was raised by you and Mom, and I have a different set of values and different set of modeling. And now what is it that I really want to be happy? And I sat down one time, Dr. Dan, and I wrote, what makes me happy? And I wrote a list. And what I realized was like, that list was not in alignment with who I was at the time. And so I started to take myself out on dates. And that sounds ridiculous to a lot of people, but it was to get to know myself again. Like, who am I really? Like, what brings me joy? What brings me happiness? And I realized that what brought me joy and happiness was when I talked about my faith, when I guided women that were in deep spiritual change towards their divine soul's purpose. Like, that to me was joyful and brought me fulfillment and happiness. When I saw people being better and achieving their level of success, whatever it was to them, their definition, that made me happy. And whether money was tied to it or not, it was totally out of the equation at this point. It was interesting because at the beginning of my life, the more money I made, quote unquote, the more successful I was. Right? But I wasn't happy. So they were in disalignment. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Well, you did. You did it in a very subjective way, because this is happiness is very subjective. What each and everyone chooses to, how to be happy or to feel happy. So again, there's a lot of distinction between both, Sylvia, the feeling of happiness and choosing to be happy. Now, when you say choosing to be happy, are you choosing it because not many choices are offered to you? So, okay, I'm going to choose happiness because the alternative is not even existent. Or do I feel happy? But then feeling happy is like a roller coaster. You have up and down, up and down. So which one is more consistent? The choice to be happy or the feeling?
I think they're interlinked. Let me share my experience with this. You don't start feeling happy until you start making the choice to be happy, in my opinion. Because every day you have pockets of joy available to you, every single day, moments that come and go very swiftly. But because you're motivated through your fear and through that level of achievement and perfectionism, you miss it entirely.
Perfect.
So for me, it's stopping every single day. Before I even begin my day, I quiet my mind and I set an intention for my day.
Okay.
What is it that I'm going to bring to my day? Now, what am I going to expect for the day to bring to me? What am I going to bring to the day? So now I'm making the choice. I'm shifting my mind to say, I'm in control of how I feel, the attitude I take, the way I respond to people if they're being mean to me or sarcastic or whatever. I have a choice whether to, I have the ability to respond in a way that makes me stay in peace with myself. And that adds happiness and joy to my life. And so for me, when you start making that choice, you start creating the identity of someone who feels happy over time, because I've made a conscious choice every day to choose happiness and joy. That's why I think they're interlinked, because the more you do that consistently, it's kind of like a habit you're forming, the more you form the identity. And once you form the identity, now your subconscious is working in your favor, not against you, if that makes any sense.
It does. But then those actually, Sylvia, who are trying to control too much of the situation, and when the situation does not go to what they expect, so the expectation are below the outcome what they were imagining, doesn't that bring more disappointment, and this disappointment will bring to anxiety and depression, and then they let go only of the negativity to come into their lives because they try to control situation too much. It didn't happen the way they wanted, and then this is where it just accentuates more of their feeling of unhappiness.
I can see that because I used to be that person. I used to be the person that was so focused on the negative. But what happened was major change. I almost lost my second marriage.
Okay.
And when I realized that my negativity was impacting all my relationships in life, I made a choice. I can either stay in the state of being negative, or I can choose to start shifting my mindset. At that point, I was already a coach. So I got coached myself.
Oh, great.
I got coached myself. No, I don't coach myself. That would be unprofessional and unethical for me to do that, because we all have blind spots, and you need someone who can keenly identify those blind spots for you. And that's part of my training with the John Maxwell team. It's something they always insist on. And so I'm currently getting coached and therapy, both, right? Because there's different angles that I take from these therapeutic options. And what I found was that I started to shift the way I thought about things. And that controlling personality kind of went by the wayside when I started to do that. When I incorporated more gratitude in my life is when that shift occurred. So at the end of every week, instead of focusing my mind on everything that went bad, I started to write down all the beautiful things I got to experience. And I say I got to experience very specifically, because I don't have to experience this. I got to. It's a blessing that I received from God. These were moments of joy that were given to me, and my heart received them with an open heart. And now I was writing them down to remind myself of everything I had. And the more I did that weekly, the more my mind sought the positive things in my life, and the illusion of control went by the wayside. Like it just kind of slipped off of me, because control is an illusion that your mind creates to keep you safe. And it creates when we're very young, right, Dr. Dan? I mean, you create a trauma as a very primary role in creating these patterns of control and behavior in our mind. And it's simply our mind's ability to keep us safe, because that's our foundational need as human beings, is to feel safe. And our mind does that very well for us. Unfortunately, as we get older, it self-sabotages us. And so that's where you find these individuals that want to control their circumstance. And the more they try to control, the more the angrier they get at life and towards the people that they love. They push everybody away. And so then do you really need to go through a divorce to figure that one out? Or can you make a change for yourself, for your family? I would dig deep into why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I had a very powerful purpose. My purpose was my children. I didn't want to go through a divorce again. Yes. So I made a choice to put myself through that. And there were days I wanted to quit. It got hard because my past programming came into play big time. My ego can come into play in especially when you're trying to make these changes. But the more you do them, even when you don't feel like it, the more you create the identity. And by 45 days, you emerge a very different person than the person that went through that journey.
Yeah, it takes around 45 to 60 days to be able to change a habit or adapt a new one. But what I've noticed as well, Sylvia, is that based on my past patients that I've helped, a lot of people tend to push away their loved one, not for selfish reason, but someone for selfless reason. And let me explain to you why. They say that sometime in your journey to success or to failure, even though no one wants it, if they experience failure, they do not want to be seen by others as that. So they would rather keep it to themselves. I don't want my family to disrespect me because I failed. So I would rather go through this journey alone. And I push everyone away to avoid bringing them into this train of disaster that I'm getting into. But in retrospect, when they're successful, they love to bring people in because they want to show off their ego again. They want to show off that they have succeeded, that they have gone through ultimate, like financial freedom, and they want to bring people in to be able to share that joy. So that's something that you've experienced by pushing people away?
I've seen people try to push people away. I saw it with my former husband, the way he did it, and even my second husband. But then that's something that you need. I've noticed that there's also a fear of abandonment. So people will abandon their loved ones first so that they don't go through the abandonment next, because the person they're becoming through that fear is not someone that they even like themselves. So I would question that one and say, why is it that you're actually pushing that person away? Primarily, is it truly a selfless reason, or is it a two-sided reason, right? Like you don't want to be abandoned. And so you're going to go first. You're going to abandon them first. But then you're still stuck in fear. The fear is still motivating you. So my advice is always just get to the root of what's really driving your actions. Mm-hmm. And when you really understand where that's coming from, and you become aware, because the process of awareness is the connections that your mind made as you were going through that trauma. And now it's about going back and unraveling those steps of the trauma and saying, yeah, that trauma, yes, it was traumatic, but then that belief that formed, really, that's a lie I've believed for a long, long time. Yes. And when you flip it on its side, like when you turn it around and uproot it, it changes your outcome altogether. For those that are so results oriented, that's where everything shifts for you, because the power it holds you, it once it's gone, there's no fear anymore. You're now free to make the choices that are going to give you that freedom that you're seeking. Absolutely. In my opinion. So
yes. So where can you tell to the listeners where they could find your book and find you, like, for your services, etc.?
Okay, so Journey to Me, this is my book, Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom of Change. You can go on my webpage, sylviaworsham.com, and you will find a way to purchase this book or any of the books I've contributed a chapter to. You can buy it, you can get an autographed copy, or you can buy it on Amazon. Both options are available on my webpage. And where to connect with me, I'm really available everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn is a good way of reaching out, and that way you understand what I do. I do primarily masterminds, and I have 3 levels of masterminds. Freedom from fear for those that are in that fearful state, joy in the journey, and it's a leveling up to that, where you start to experience a little bit more joy and try to identify the path, your divine soul's purpose. And then the third and final level is trust in God's sovereignty, and that's where you surrender daily. So that's what I do.
Beautiful. Well, Sylvia, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible knowledge in the field of change. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 17 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories, just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Never underestimate the incredible power of your own desire to change. It's a force that can move mountains, break down barriers, and transform lives. Embrace this power from within you, for it holds the key to unlocking a future of endless possibilities. Every step you take towards a change sends ripples of inspiration into the world. So dare to dream, believe in yourself, and let your unwavering desire propel you towards the life you envision. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that step is yours to take. My name is Dr. drdanamzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.